heading towards the hill. Books, Mikhailovich, sometimes. It's useful to read. As Maxim Gorky said, books, the source of knowledge. The cramped hill smelled of bleach and old rags. Daria changed into a gray uniform, tied her hair with a headscarf, and looked at herself critically. Cracked mirror. Cinderella on a minimum wage, she thought with a sigh. Her slender figure was drowning in baggy robes, and her gray eyes seemed dull from lack of sleep, only light brown hair peeking out from under. The unruly strands of her headscarves reminded her that beneath those faceless clothes lurked a 24-year-old girl, not a tired shadow. The cart with the equipment creaked obediently as Daria rolled it toward the elevator. From the third, too. The fifth floor was her territory. 15 offices, restrooms, hallways. All of this needed to be in order before 6 a.m., before the first employees started stretching. Daria put in her headphones and turned on an audiobook. The announcer's voice rang in her ears. Anna Karenina, Part 3. Chapter 22. Floors, glass, trash, dust. The sounds of classical music made the work go faster. Sometimes she even imagined she was washing the floors not in an office, but in an old mansion, where the ball was about to begin. The advertising agency Corona was located on the 4th floor. Daria always saved it for last. This was the most interesting place. Fashionable design solutions, graffiti-covered walls, open, a space with bright sofas and beanbags. And of course, endless sheets of paper with text drafts scattered everywhere. Well, hello, Fikuzik. Daria gently stroked the leaves of the huge ficus tree, standing at the entrance. How are you, green friend? Heard a lot of interesting things today. The ficus was silent, but Daria thought she saw it slightly shake its top. Silent? That's right. Official secrets are not to be divulged. And I'll tell you something. She lowered her voice to a whisper. Mom's not feeling well today. The doctor prescribed new medications, but they're so expensive. Can you imagine? One package costs a third of my salary. Daria sighed, and she began wiping the plant's leaves with a damp cloth. You know, Fikuzik, literacy is a new luxury these days, so you and I are, you might say, intellectually rich. It's just a shame we're materially poor. She chuckled. She critically examined the ficus again, from stem to tip. Silent. It's good you're not driving me away, partner. As Walter said, I don't agree with what you're saying, but I will defend your right to this to the death. Speak. Having finished with the ficus, Daria began cleaning. Under one of the tables, she found a crumpled sheet of paper. Professional habit forced her to unfold it before throwing it away. It was written in a brilliant, sweeping style, in handwriting at the top. Below was a sketch of an advertising campaign for a baby food manufacturer. Yes, it really is brilliant, Daria chuckled, especially considering that the word brilliant is spelled with an E she was about to. I threw the sheet away, but my gaze caught the text. Daria sat down on her jacket and began reading. Our baby food does not contain any harmful additives. It is made from select fruits and can be stored for up to 2 years without losing its flavor. And benefits. Daria winced as if she'd bitten into a lemon. Oh my God. There are 3 hyphenated errors in every sentence here. It's a present tense verb, written without a soft sign, and kept is. The indefinite form, on the contrary, has a soft sign. And this is written by professionals, they get paid for it. On the next table lay a stack of documents. Daria glanced at the top sheet. It was a draft of a press release for a major construction company. And again, the text was riddled with errors. Something inside Daria couldn't take it anymore. She took a pen with red ink out of her pocket. Unfortunately, that's all she had at home, a relic of her mother's school-teaching days. And she began to correct. Carefully, almost lovingly, she placed commas, corrected the price, underlined repetitions and stylistic errors. Half an hour later, the stack of documents was gleaming with red marks. On a separate sheet of paper, Daria, she wrote, Sorry, but I'm very ashamed of my native Russian language. Sincerely, the Literacy Fairy. She slipped a note on top of the pile and continued cleaning, listening to a melody from her headphones. At 6 a.m., having finished her work, Daria handed the keys to a sleepy Mikhailik and went outside. The city was just waking up. Street cleaners were scraping the sidewalks. The first buses rumbled down the avenue, and the sky in the east had already opened, heralding Yasny. It was a long walk home. From the Fontanka embankment to the outskirts, where she and her mother rented a tiny one-room apartment. Daria was saving on transportation. An extra ticket meant less money for her mother's medicine. Along the way, She saw something new. A notice on the board by the entrance. For rent, apartment unavailable. For respectable tenants. Daria stopped dead in her tracks, pulled the now familiar pen from her pocket, and decisively crossed out the errors, writing a correction above them. "What are you doing?" A voice came from behind her. Daria turned around. A young man in a tracksuit was looking at her curiously, correcting my illiteracy. "If you're renting out an apartment, do this. Literate." "What, the smartest?" The guy chuckled, but without aggression. "No, just literate," Daria retorted. "Literacy is her cousin of talent. Chekhov, I think." The guy laughed and took out his phone. Shall I take a picture? I'll show it to my friends." "Cool. Go ahead," Daria shrugged. Continuing on, she heard the guy dictating to someone on the phone. "Just imagine, some girl wrote the whole ad in red. No, I don't know who, but it really stings." The house was quiet. Mom was still asleep, and Daria tried not to make any noise. She put the kettle on, took yesterday's pasta out of the fridge, and warmed it up in the microwave. She opened her tattered notebook. A diary of mistakes. Top finds of the day. Brilliant idea. Brilliantly illiterate. Apartment for rent. I wonder what kind of owners it is if the ad is already full of mistakes. Selling cat at the pet store on Legovsky Prospect. The kittens are in shock. Daria giggled and closed the notebook. Her phone beeped. A message from her mother's doctor. "Daria, good afternoon. Just a reminder that you need to buy new medications from the list below and measure your blood pressure, morning and evening for a week. Call me if you have any questions. Not a single comma to measure instead of measure." Daria sighed and sent a reply. "Good afternoon, Irina Petrovna. Thank you for the reminder. I'll definitely buy everything and measure my blood pressure morning and evening. If any arise, if you have any questions, I'll call. Sincerely, Daria." Mom stirred in the room. Daria quickly folded her notebook, hid her phone, and went to put the kettle on. The day was just beginning, and ahead lay a short respite before another night shift. A week later, the entire office of the advertising agency Corona was buzzing like a disturbed beehive. The mysterious literacy fairy became a local legend. Every morning, employees found documents that had been corrected, and sometimes there are even sarcastic comments in the margins. If this is a headline for an advertisement for a plastic surgery clinic, then the word elegance is spelled with a sha. Otherwise, you're offering services that are as elegant as they are vulgar. Exclusive spelled with a YU, not a U. Otherwise, it becomes exclusive, which sounds like a new type of weapon rather than a luxury item. Young copywriters began deliberately leaving texts with errors to see if they would be noticed. A mysterious assistant. Daria smiled to herself when she saw these traps and invariably found all the catches. "This is the prank of the century," admired the intern Lasha. "We need to set up a camera and catch this clever fairy." "No, wait," designer Kostya objected. "Maybe it's one of our own?" "Masha, she studied at the philology department. I'll never bother with that." Masha from the marketing department snorted. "I have my own things to worry about," and Daria silently scrubbed the floors. She watered the ficuses and listened to their conversations, hiding a smile. She walked home along the now familiar route. Coins jingled in her pocket. A week's pay. Enough for medicine for Mom, bread, pasta, maybe even. New tights if you save on transportation. "Hey, Thunderbird," a familiar voice called out to her. She turned around. The guy by the apartment for rent sign was now waving at her. "Remember me? Did you edit the ad?" "I remember," she nodded. "Daria, what else? Found any mistakes?" "No, I check everything now," he said proudly. "You know that photo with the notice board was posted online and got 10,000 likes. People are writing, 'Let's start a flash mob, spell the grid correctly.'" "Seriously?" "Daria." I couldn't believe my ears. "Yeah." The guy handed her the phone. "Look, there's already a bunch of photos with the corrected ads." Daria scrolled through the feed. Indeed, dozens of people were posting photos where they had corrected the mistakes in red pen. On signs, on menus, in ads. "You're something else. You've become a star." The guy took the phone. "What's your name anyway?" "Gramatika." "Daria." She smiled. "Just Daria. And I'm Seryoga." He held out his hand. "Listen, maybe you could start the block? Like a bug hunter or something." "No time," Daria shook her head. "Work, home, Mom's sick." "Too bad," Seryoga sighed. "You could have made a killing off this." "You know," Daria said thoughtfully, "literacy isn't for sale. It's like air. It should be accessible to everyone. And if you charge money for the purity of the language, it's like paying for fresh air. You're a philosopher, Dasha." Seryoga chuckled. "Okay, bye." If anything happens, call me, I'll help. He handed her a piece of paper with a phone number. Daria nodded and continued on her way, reflecting on the strangeness of life. Who would have thought that her little rebellion against illiteracy could inspire someone? And there was another night shift ahead, another battle for the purity of both language and office space. The stars twinkled above the langar, as if winking at her. Hold on, girl, it's just beginning. The April morning was spreading over, St. Petersburg in a delicate watercolor. The swollen buds on the trees were preparing to burst forth with their first timid greenery, and the Neva, freed from its icy shackles, rolled its leaden waters toward the Gulf of Finland. The spring of 2015 was entering its. She hesitated, as if trying on a new dress. Daria finished her shift earlier than usual. The day before, she hadn't had time to properly clean the windows in the Crown office. Some people had been staying there late, so she decided to finish work in the morning, at 6:30. The business center was still dozing. Only the early cleaning ladies occasionally jingled their keys, and the security guards lazily leafed through yesterday's newspapers. Quietly sipping a tray of music from an office romance, Daria wiped the huge panoramic windows, admiring the view. An awakening city, an English audio course played in her headphones, another small investment in the future she'd allowed herself. A journalist can't do without language, she thought, carefully repeating the complex phrases after the announcer. If I were you, I would check the grammar first, said Daria, looking at her reflection in the glass. If I were you, I would check the grammar first. Her reflection smiled sadly in response. Suddenly behind her, there was the sound of the door opening. Daria turned around and saw a short, stocky man of about 30 with tousled dark hair and a rumpled, but clearly expensive suit. He was dragging a large folder of documents and looked like he'd spent the night right there in the office. Good morning, Daria muttered, quickly taking off her headphones. I'm almost done. The man nodded without looking at her and walked over to his desk, which was littered with papers. It was Denis Korolev, the owner of the Crown, whom Daria had only seen briefly before. He usually showed up at the office later, after the cleaning crew had already finished work. Daria hurriedly gathered her things when she heard a muffled curse. Korolev stood over the table, holding a stack of documents, corrected in red pen. What's this? He began, looking up at Daria. Is that you? She froze, like a deer in the headlights. A shiver ran down her spine. A chill. He'll fire me. A panicked thought flashed through his mind. Sorry, I started, Daria. Are you completely out of your mind? His voice sounded louder than necessary in the empty office. These are commercial documents. Yes, we have $1 million contract here. Daria. She swallowed, but suddenly felt a wave of irritation rising inside her. 2 months of night shifts, chronic sleep deprivation, a sick mother. And now this boss, who even? She doesn't know the basic rules of the Russian language. Are you fucking crazy enough to write $1 million contract with all the mistakes? She blurted out before she could think. A ringing silence hung in the office. Korolev looked at her as if she had just turned into an alien. What? He finally said. Daria took a deep breath. It was too late to back out. I'm saying, she said slowly and clearly, that, in a contract for 1 million rubles, it's unacceptable to write, we offer instead of, offer, to participate instead of, to participate, and within a month instead of within a month. That's shameful. Korolev blinked. He was clearly not used to being treated this way. That's how they talked, especially the cleaning ladies. Slowly lowering his gaze to the documents, he flipped through a few pages, then looked back at Daria. So, it's you, the literacy fairy. A note of curiosity crept into his voice. She raised her chin. You can fire me, but I can't stand human security. Korolev suddenly chuckled and threw the folder on the table. Impudent, he stated. Who are you anyway? A human, Daria replied, remembering. My mother's favorite phrase. You're a human being too, Korolev responded sarcastically. Only, apparently, an illiterate one. He walked around the table and plopped down in a chair, gesturing for Daria to sit opposite. She remained standing, leaning on the mop like, on the staff. Do you have a higher education? He asked. Pedagogical college, answered Daria, a teacher of Russian language and literature for elementary grades. And why are you washing floors instead of teaching children? And why do you publish texts with errors instead of? Are you submitting it to the editors for review? She retorted. The corners of Korolev's lips twitched in a hint of a smile. He leaned back in his chair. What's your name? Daria Svetlova. And mine is Denis. He extended his hand. Just call me Dennis. She hesitantly shook his hand, dry, rough, and calloused, not at all consistent with the image of a wealthy businessman. On Dennis's desk, Daria noticed a book, The Art of Business Correspondence, with a bookmark on the first page. Dust covered the cover. She was saying that they hadn't gotten past the first page. Oh, I see you're actively studying the epistolary genre. She couldn't resist a jab. Dennis followed her gaze and looked slightly embarrassed. No time, he muttered. I'm up to my ears in work and here you are showing off. He flipped through the corrected documents again, and his face grew serious. Listen, do you understand the language very well? I understand it very well, without false modesty, Daria replied. Maybe you'd like to earn some extra money? Dennis suggested unexpectedly. Like proofread our texts. I'd pay you extra. Not much, of course, but still money. Daria felt something inside her break. She'd studied for so many years. I dreamed of a career as a journalist, and here he paid me a little extra. I'm not a beggar. I got away from her. If the work is necessary, then you have to pay humanely. Every comma is someone's fate. She remembered how her mother, checking school papers. Notebooks, she said. Today you make a mistake with a comma. Tomorrow you'll make a mistake in life. And how many times has this wisdom proven prophetic? Dennis frowned. Such a rebuff was clearly not part of his plan. Are you offended? He looked sincere, puzzled. I just suggested it. I thought it was for you. Well, you need the money. Something in his tone in this awkward attempt to explain softened Daria a little. After all, he didn't have to know that she had a sick mother and that the medications are getting more expensive every month. Excuse me, she straightened up, but if you really want me to proofread your text, it should be a normal job with a salary. And to make sure there are no errors in the contract, she doesn't. She resisted a smile. Dennis looked at her with an incomprehensible expression. Perhaps surprise, perhaps respect. And you? He hesitated, searching for words. Well, brave, desperate, Daria corrected. When you have nothing to lose, it's easy to be brave. She hung. A pause. The day was breaking outside, and the sun's rays, breaking through the clear glass, drew intricate patterns on the floor. Are you in trouble? Dennis asked unexpectedly. Daria gripped the mop handle so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Fingers. Everyone has problems, she answered evasively. It's just that some solve them with money, and some with washing the floors. Dennis suddenly stood up and went to the window. Against the morning light, his figure seemed like a dark silhouette, like a toy cut out of cardboard. You know, my father was a mechanic, he said unexpectedly. In Tula, at the arms factory. Zapponi was a blessed memory. And I grew up in an orphanage from the age of 7. I washed the floors there, too, as punishment. Daria froze, unsure how to respond to this sudden revelation. Then grandfather's home, vocational school, the army. Dennis continued without turning around. And then I realized that I had to, well, get out, and I did. Only sometimes, it seems to me that none of this is real, like some kind of game. All these, what are they called, business lunches, presentations, contracts? It's not my thing. He turned around abruptly, and Daria saw a strange expression on his face, a mixture of anger and vulnerability. Okay, I've been chatting for a while. He rubbed his face with his palms, as if erasing a moment of weakness. Anyway, if you want to work properly, you'll get your salary as expected. Come tomorrow at 10. Let's talk specifically. Daria couldn't believe her ears. She expected a reprimand, dismissal, but certainly not a job offer. Are you serious? She breathed out. Do I look like a joker? Dennis chuckled. No, she faltered. Thank you. You're welcome. He's back to business for now. We'll see how you handle it. By the way, where do you work now? Besides cleaning, I mean. Nowhere, admitted Daria. Only here at night. Why is that? With yours? Well, literacy. Daria sighed. She didn't want to talk about how she'd been knocking on the doors of editorial offices, how they wouldn't hire her without experience, and how there was nowhere to get it. It's tough to find work these days, she replied succinctly. Crisis. Dennis nodded, as if that said it all. Voices could be heard in the hallway, and the first employees began to arrive. Respa realized she'd stayed longer than expected. I have to go, she grabbed the bucket and mop. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Dennis nodded and suddenly added. And thanks for the correction. It really helped. Otherwise, we would have embarrassed ourselves in front of the clients. Daria turned around at the door. You know, Mom always said, literacy is respect for the interlocutor. When you write without mistakes, you show that you respect the person who will read it. Dennis nodded thoughtfully and then suddenly smiled openly, without his usual wariness. Is your mom smart? Yes, Daria answered quietly. Very smart. On the way home, Daria couldn't get over what had happened. Work, a real job in her field, maybe not journalism, but still connected to text, to language, to what she loved and was good at. Her heart was pounding like crazy, and hundreds of thoughts were racing through her head. How much would they offer her? Would it be enough for her mother's medicine? Would she be able to juggle this job with the cleaning ladies' night shifts? Two elderly women, the constant observers of all the goings-on in the yard, were sitting on a bench in front of the building's entrance. Hello, Maria Stepanovna. Hello, Anna Nikolaevna, Daria greeted politely. Hello, Dashenka, Maria Stepanovna responded. How's Mom? Better, thank you. Daria tried to slip into the entrance, but was stopped by the next question. Are you still looking for a job? Anna Nikolaevna inquired. Our neighbor's son from the third floor became a security guard. They pay well, by the way, thank you, but I think I've already found a job. Daria couldn't resist sharing the good news. Bye. What specialty? What are you talking about? Maria Stepanovna threw up her hands. To become a school teacher? No, to an advertising agency, Daria answered. I'll check the texts and edit them. Oh, what's there? There are a lot of men. Anna Nikolaevna narrowed her eyes. Young? Unmarried? Daria felt herself blushing. I wasn't interested, she snapped. What's important to me is that the work is interesting. Well, well, she drawled meaningfully. Maria Stepanovna, change my word. You'll be married before you know it. You're a good-looking girl even if you're thin. I got this job because I'm literate, Daria said firmly. And you'll have to excuse me, but I need to… Mom. The apartment was quiet. Mom was dozing in a chair with a book on her lap. Her face was haggard, her light brown hair streaked with gray, her arms emaciated. The illness was mercilessly changing this once beautiful and energetic woman. Daria carefully. She kissed her mother on the forehead. She opened her eyes and smiled weakly. Dashenka, are you back yet? Her voice was quiet but clear. How's work? Mom, you won't believe it. Daria couldn't contain her excitement. I've been offered a real job, to edit texts at an advertising agency. Galina Svetlova's eyes lit up with joy. Daughter, I'm so happy. See, I told you your knowledge would come in handy. You were right, as always. Daria sat down next to her mother's chair. Remember, I told you about the documents with errors. Well, the agency owner himself caught me. Oh, Mom said, scared. So what? He yelled at me at first, of course. Daria laughed and then suggested, work. Can you imagine? Of course. Galina smiled. Smart people value knowledge. And what is he like? This owner is ordinary. Daria shrugged. Well, as ordinary as it gets. Rich, of course, but not for Davak. How could you think? He himself is from. Simple. You see, Mom gently stroked her hand. Not everything is so bad in this world, and not all the rich are villains. Daria remembered Dennis's sudden confession about the orphanage and nodded. Yes, Mom, you're right. Not everything. In the evening, getting ready for bed. Before her night shift, Daria pondered the strange turn of her fate. What was it? A lucky break, or the result of her tenacity? Would Dennis Korolov have noticed her if she hadn't risked amending other people's documents? Courage takes cities, Mom said. And it seemed she was right about that, too. The phone rang in the hallway, an old landline left over from the previous owners. Daria frowned. Who could it be? Few people knew that number. Hello? She said cautiously. She. Daria, a familiar voice rang out. It's Dennis. Dennis Korolev. Where did you get this number? She asked in surprise. I found it in your application when they were applying for your job, he replied. Listen, here's the deal. We have a meeting tomorrow. The presentation is important, and in the text? Well, in short, it's complete, I just noticed. You can come earlier. About 8 o'clock, I'll meet you at the entrance. Daria hesitated. On the one hand, she was planning to get some sleep before the first workday. On the other hand, it was a chance to show off. Okay, she said decisively. I'll be there at 8. Well, thank you anyway. Dennis thanked awkwardly. See you tomorrow. After hanging up, Daria leaned against the wall. Inside, everything. She trembled with a strange feeling, a mixture of fear and delight. Tomorrow, a new life begins, and she is ready for it. The summer sun bathed St. Petersburg in a thick amber light, turning the Neva into flowing gold. By the end of June 2015, Daria had finally settled into her new role at the Corona Advertising Agency. She was assigned a small desk by the window, a computer, and a stack of corporate business cards with the inscription, Daria Svetlova, editor. Every time she pulled out a business card, she felt a childish delight. It was as if she'd been given a pass to a new life. The morning was particularly hot. Daria, dressed in a light blue dress, the only decent one in her meager wardrobe, sat at the computer, proofreading a text for a new client. The fan on the desk was blowing hot air, not really cooling it down. "Dasha, help me." Masha from the marketing department, whom they'd quickly become friends with, burst into the office. "There's a presentation in an hour, and there's clearly something wrong with the text. But I can understand that." Daria smiled. In 2 months of work, she had become a real lifeline for the entire agency. Everyone, from interns to department heads, turned to her. "Let's see." She took the flash drive he held out to her. "What the? Client? Megadom Construction Company." Masha nervously fiddled with the bracelet on her wrist. "They're terrible bores. Everything has to be perfect. And I always get my commas mixed up. Everyone gets them mixed up," Daria reassured her, opening the file. "Pushkin, they say. He wasn't very good with commas either, which is why he needed Zhukovsky to proofread." Masha smiled gratefully and plopped down on the chair next to him. "How's your mother?" she asked quietly. "Better," Daria nodded. "The new medications are helping, and now I have money, thanks to Denis Alexeyevich. He's got a thing for you," Masha giggled. "Everyone notices stupid things," Daria snapped, feeling the blood rush to her cheeks. "He just values professionalism. Yeah, especially when that professional is slim and handsome, in a short dress and with gorgeous hair," Masha winked. "I'm not judging you. He's a handsome man. Stop it." Daria looked sternly at her friend. "No, romantic stories. I need a job, not a relationship." Masha was about to respond, but a phone call interrupted her. Daria returned to the presentation, quickly caught a few errors, and corrected the style. Work gave her pleasure, a real pleasure, like combing tangled hair, turning it into smooth, silky strands. Done. She handed the flash drive to Masha, who had returned. There were some punctuation marks and repetitions in the third paragraph. "You're wonderful, Masha." Kissed her on the cheek. "Lunch is on me." When she left, Daria immersed herself in work again. The phone on the desk rang. "Daria Svetlova, editor," she said, still feeling slightly awkward about these words. "Daria," came an unfamiliar voice. A shaky voice. "Dorochka, is that you?" "Yes," she answered cautiously. "Who am I speaking to?" "This is Vera Nikolaevna, your neighbor from the 5th floor." The voice on the phone trembled. "Dorochka, dear. Help an old woman. I'm in trouble." "What happened, Vera?" "Nikolaevna?" Daria became alarmed, remembering the elderly woman who lived above them with her mother. "They robbed me, my dear, not really, but with papers." There were tears in her voice. "I signed some documents, and now they say that—" She gave away the apartment. "My Artemushka is being thrown out onto the street." Artemushka was the name of Vera Nikolaevna's 12-year-old grandson, a smart boy whom she raised after the death of her daughter and son-in-law in a car accident. "Where are you now?" asked Daria, feeling the familiar feeling of righteous anger boiling inside her. "Oh, my dear, where else would I be?" The old woman sobbed. "I would come down to you, but my legs just won't move." "I'll get up myself," Daria said decisively. "This evening at about 7 o'clock, and take all the documents you signed." "Thank you, Dorochka. God bless you." Vera Nikolaevna breathed a sigh of relief. After hanging up Daria, she thought about it. The story sounded typical. Another bunch of scammers hunting for the apartments of lonely pensioners. But what could she do? She wasn't a lawyer, not an attorney. Problems? A voice came from the door. Daria looked up, in the doorway. Denis stood in the doorway, his hands in his trouser pockets. For the past 2 months he had been unusually quiet and polite with her, as if he was afraid of scaring her off. Sometimes she caught his thoughtful gaze, but he would immediately turn away, pretending to look into window. "No, I mean yes, but not mine." She hesitated. The neighbor was scammed, it seems. Some kind of scammers with the apartment. Denis frowned and went into the office, closing the door behind him. "Seriously? How did this happen?" "I don't know. Bye." Daria shrugged. "I'll go and sort it out this evening. Do you understand this stuff?" He rubbed his chin. "Not really good at legal matters," Daria admitted. "But I can read and search for information. And documents are documents. You can always find something there. Mistakes, if you know where to look." Denis paused, looking out the window. "All sorts of notarial certifications are needed there," he finally said. "If the notary is Lipovoy, it can be contested." "How do you know?" Daria was surprised. He shrugged awkwardly. "They often tried to deceive us at the orphanage. I learned to look with documents. Something warm stirred in Daria's chest. Every time Dennis lifted the curtain on his past, she saw in him a less self-assured. A businessman, but a boy who matured early and carried the scars of childhood grievances in his soul. "Want me to help?" he suddenly offered. "I know a lawyer. I can call you." "Thank you," Daria sincerely thanked him. "But first, I'll take a look myself. I don't want to bother anyone important if it all turns out to be a simple misunderstanding." "As you wish," he nodded. "But if anything happens, contact me." When he left, Daria opened her browser and began searching for information about real estate fraud. Work can wait. There are more important things than correct commas in advertising copy. At 7 p.m., Daria went up to the 5th floor of her building. Artyom, a thin teenager with serious eyes, opened the door and tousled blonde hair. "Hello, Aunt Dasha." He led her into the apartment. "Grandma's waiting for you." Vera Nikolaevna sat in an old armchair, covered with a blanket despite the summer heat. Her dry hands were fiddling with some papers, and on the table next to her stood a cup of cold tea. "Dorochka, thank you for coming." The old woman's face lit up. "Look what I stupidly signed." Daria took the documents and began to read them carefully. It was a deed of gift of an apartment to a certain charitable foundation for the support of pensioners. Zaboda. According to the deed, Vera Nikolaevna voluntarily and gratuitously transferred her apartment to the foundation, and the foundation was obligated provide her and her grandson with decent living conditions and medical care in a specialized nursing home. "How did this happen?" Daria asked, feeling anger boiling inside. Two girls came, so polite, so beautiful. Vera Nikolaevna sighed. "They said it was from Sabes. They said there was a new program for single pensioners. You can hand over your apartment to the state and in exchange get a place in a good nursing home with doctors, with food. And what better place will Artyomushka have there than with me, a sick person? The school is nearby and there are all sorts of clubs." "And you believed it?" Daria asked softly. Her daughter believed it. Tears welled up in the old woman's eyes. They showed such documents with seals, with signatures. They spoke on behalf of the mayor's office themselves. "And what about me? I'm old, sick, and it's hard for Artyom to be with me." Daria continued studying the documents. The further she read, the more she frowned. The contract was cunningly drawn up. At first glance, everything seemed legal. But upon closer inspection, look, Daria pointed out one of the clauses. It says here that boarding is provided subject to availability, and if there are no vacancies, it turns out you've given away the apartment, and you might not get anything in return. "Oh my God," Vera Nikolaevna gasped, but I didn't even notice. "And here," Daria continued, turning the pages, "the foundation has the right to terminate the agreement unilaterally in the event of a breach. Clauses 5.2 and 5.7. These clauses contain conditions that are impossible not to violate. For example, daily participation in the boarding house's cultural events. You can't participate in events every day with your legs." "What should we do, Dorochka?" Vera Nikolaevna's eyes were filled with fear. "Are we really going outside?" "You won't," Daria said firmly. "I'm not done yet." She checked. She carefully examined the seals and signatures on the documents. Something about them seemed off, but she couldn't figure out what exactly. Suddenly, her gaze caught the inscription on the seal. "Municipal Institution." "Aha," Daria exclaimed triumphantly. "Look, institution with an E. It's a fake." "How so?" Vera Nikolaevna didn't get it. "Institution doesn't have the letter E after the she," Daria explained. "A real state seal can't contain a spelling error. It's a 100% fake." She continued checking the documents and found several more obvious errors. Charitable Foundation for Pensioners. The letter D is missing in the word. Support. Fraud in the clause on the party's liability instead of fraud, and a dozen more punctuation and grammatical errors. "Vera Nikolaevna, these documents are Filka's writings." Daria could barely contain herself. Indignation. They were written by illiterate scammers. They can't even spell their own profession correctly. "Really?" the old woman asked hopefully. "So it's invalid. Not only invalid, but also evidence against them." Daria took out her phone. "I'm calling the police right now." Artyom, who had been silently listening to their conversation, suddenly spoke up. "Aunt Dasha, how did you notice everything so quickly?" "I did too. I read it, but I didn't understand anything." Daria gently patted the boy on the head. "Because I read carefully, Artyom, and I know what real documents should look like. Literacy isn't just about correct letters. It's the ability to spot a catch where others let me through. The doorbell rang. The local police officer, a young sergeant with a tired face, stood there. Hello, Daria greeted. We called about a fraud case. So quickly? Vera Nikolaevna was surprised. You just called. It was me who called, a voice came from the stairwell. Denis Korolev was standing there. Sorry for coming uninvited. I just decided to check on you. Daria looked at him with undisguised surprise and with gratitude. The district police officer examined the documents, listened to Vera Nikolaevna's story, and wrote down her testimony. It's good that you contacted us in time, he said. This group has been operating in the area for a long time. We need to. We'll come to the station and write an official statement. When the policeman left, Daria, Denis, Vera Nikolaevna, and Artyom sat down to drink tea in the kitchen. The old woman calmed down a little and even looked amazed. Dorochka, how are you? Thank you. She stroked the girl's hand with her wrinkled palm. Did you save us? Not yet, Daria said cautiously. We need to finish this. I'll take a day off tomorrow and go with you to the police. I'll go too, unexpectedly, said Denis, and I'll bring my lawyer. For free, he added, seeing Vera Nikolaevna's frightened eyes. Thank you, young man, the old woman said, tears welling up. God bless you. You're welcome. Denis was embarrassed. I can't stand these, what are they called, scammers. I suffered through it myself as a child. When they left the apartment, Daria turned to Denis. Thank you for coming, but it wasn't necessary, I know. He shrugged. He just wanted to help. They walked down the stairs in silence. Finally, Denis asked, how did you immediately realize the documents were fake? From the grammatical errors, Daria answered simply. Official documents are not. May contain errors, and these ones just splash the name. Especially the seal of a municipal institution. Can you imagine? Yeah, right, Denis chuckled, and I wouldn't have even noticed. That's why I'm your editor, Daria smiled. At the entrance, they stopped. The summer evening breathed a warm wind, smelled of linden trees and asphalt heated up during the day. Are you going home? Denis asked. Yes, Mom is waiting, Daria nodded. Thank you again. Listen, and you? He hesitated, looking at the toes of his shoes. Well, maybe we could have dinner together sometime? Daria felt her heart skip a beat. Why? She asked bluntly. Just, he shrugged. Talk? You? Really. It's interesting. I'm your employee, Denis Alexievich, Daria reminded him. And I don't want gossip in the office. I don't care about gossip, he suddenly said heatedly. He didn't finish the sentence, waved his hand and headed to his. Car, a black SUV, parked on the side of the road. See you tomorrow, he threw over his shoulder. At 9 at the police station. Daria watched him go, feeling a strange mixture of emotions. What was it? A simple formality or something more? The next day, Daria Vera Nikolaevna, Denis, and his lawyer, a calm man in an expensive suit, met at the police station. After a lengthy discussion and paperwork, they were informed that there was already a lawyer at the given address. There had been several similar complaints. We need to find out who's behind this, Denis said as they left the office. It's a whole gang. I have an idea, Daria said slowly. The foundation's address was listed in the contract. What if we go there? It's dangerous, the lawyer frowned. It's better to leave it to the police. What if they disappear in the meantime? Daria objected. Or will they deceive someone else? We'll just see what kind of office it is, who's there. Sitting. I'm with you, Denis said decisively. But we'll leave the old lady at home. Vera Nikolaevna didn't object. Today's trip to the police had exhausted her. Artyom volunteered to walk the grandmother home, and Daria, Denis, and the lawyer went. The address specified in the contract. The charity's office was located in a nondescript building on the outskirts of town. The sign on the door read, Care Fund, Help for Pensioners. What are we going to do? Denis asked when We parked across the street. We'll go in and ask, Daria shrugged. I'll say I want to get my aunt into their boarding house. It's dangerous, the lawyer repeated. They might suspect something, and I'll take a voice recorder with me, she smiled. Daria, and all the papers they give. The lawyer shook his head but didn't argue. Denis looked worried. Maybe I should come with you? No, Daria said firmly. They might remember you, and I'm an ordinary girl like thousands of them. With these words, she got out of the car and headed toward the office. Her heart was pounding, but she tried to look calm. In her purse lay a switched-on voice recorder and a folder with copies of Vera's documents. Nikolaevna. The office was cool and empty. A pretty girl with perfect hair sat behind the counter. "Hello," Daria smiled warmly. "I was told about your foundation. I would like to find out about the conditions for my aunt." "Of course, sit down," the girl pointed to a chair. "My name is Alla Granitskaya. I'm the foundation's PR director." Daria almost jumped in surprise. Alla Granitskaya. She heard that name often in the Corona office. It was the name of Denis's ex-girlfriend, who left the agency under strange circumstances. Daria had seen her framed photo on Denis's desk when she first started. Work as a cleaner. "Nice to meet you, Daria." She extended her hand, trying not to show her surprise. Alla, a striking brunette with predatory features, began to talk about the wonderful conditions about the boarding house, about medical care, about the cultural program. Everything sounded smooth and convincing. She pulled out a glossy brochure with photos of a well-kept building and happy pensioners. "Where is the boarding house itself?" Daria asked. "In the suburbs, in an ecologically clean area." Alla smiled, showing her perfect teeth. "If you want, we can organize a tour next week. And, can I see the documents?" Daria tried to sound casual. "Well, the contract, the terms and conditions." Of course, Alla pulled out a folder with documents. "Here's a standard contract. You can study it and ask all the questions." Daria took the contract and began reading. It was exactly the same document as Vera Nikolaevna's, with the same errors and pitfalls. She pretended to study the clauses carefully, but she was discreetly taking photos. "The pages are on my phone." "Impressive," she finally said. "And who runs the fund?" "I'd like to know who I'm dealing with." "Oh, our director is on a business trip right now." Alla frowned slightly. "But I can give him your contact information." Daria wrote down the fictitious name and phone number, thanked Alla warmly, and left the office. A worried Denis and the lawyer were waiting for her in the car. "Well?" Denis asked impatiently. "You won't believe it," but Daria shook her head. "Alla Granitskaya works." Denis's face changed. He turned pale, then flushed, and then cursed so harshly that even the imperturbable lawyer winced. "Is that true?" he asked finally. She introduced herself, nodded. "Daria," and then she took out her phone. "I took a photo of the contract. The same mistakes, the same terms. It's definitely the same gang." The lawyer studied the photos and nodded with satisfaction. "This is serious evidence. We need to hand it over to the police. I'll call myself." Denis pulled out his phone. "I have some friends there." While he was talking, Daria looked at the foundation's office and thought about the strange turns of fate. Who would have thought that her current boss's ex-girlfriend would be connected to fraudsters defrauding pensioners? A week later, several dozen elderly people gathered at the district community center, all those who had managed to sign documents with the charitable foundation. The police asked Daria to speak in front of them and explain why the contracts are invalid. She stood on the small stage, feeling her mouth go dry with excitement. Vera Nikolaevna and Artyom were sitting in the front row, smiling at her encouragingly. Denis stood leaning against the wall at the entrance to the hall. He didn't want to sit down, but he couldn't leave either. "Good afternoon," Daria began, trying to sound confident. "My name is Daria Svetlova. I'm an editor by training, and today I want to tell you how common mistakes in writing can help expose deception." She took a deep breath and continued. "People, we are being deceived." Her voice grew stronger, more confident. "Look, it says here, the recipient instead of the recipient. They can't even deceive you properly. If you can't write properly, at least don't deceive elderly people who have worked honestly for the good of the country their entire lives." Countries. A murmur of indignation swept through the room. Daria unfolded the enlarged copies of the documents and began pointing out all the errors she'd found. The seal spelled municipal institution with an E. See, she pointed to the projector where an enlarged copy of the seal was displayed. It's as if the word police was written on a police uniform. "Would you trust such a police officer?" "No," voices were heard from the audience. "That's what I'm saying," Daria nodded. "Here, in the liability clause, it says fraud instead of swindle. They can't even spell the name of their crime correctly." The room perked up, and laughter and indignant murmurs could be heard. Exclamations. Socrates said, "Speak so that I can see you," continued Daria, feeling a wave of inspiration sweep over her. "But that's how these swindlers spoke, and we saw them, saw their illiteracy there. their disregard for us, their belief in our inattention. She moved on to the legal side of the issue, explaining in simple terms why contracts are invalid, what rights victims have, and what to do. Further, a document with a forged seal has no legal force, she said. It's like a receipt written on toilet paper, and even if you sign such a document, you don't lose anything. The lawyer hired by the police supplemented her explanation with professional commentary, but it was clear that Derry's simple, emotional speech resonated more with the audience. I have a counter question for the fraudster's representative, the lawyer said, pointing out, on the detained Alla Granitskaya, who was being escorted by police. You claim that these are just technical errors, but let me ask, if you're so careless with the paperwork, wouldn't you also? Negligent in caring for the elderly? Yes, these are just technical errors, Alla snapped. So what, a couple of typos? Yes, just, Daria retorted. Like an atomic bomb, just a firecracker. Laughter echoed through the hall. When the meeting ended, many people approached Daria, thanked her, and shook her hand. One old woman hugged her with tears in her eyes. Daughter, thank you. I would have lost everything. I would have thrown my grandchildren out on the street. Artyom, Vera's grandson. Nikolaevna pushed his way through the crowd to Daria. Aunt Dasha, that was awesome. His eyes sparkled with admiration. I want to protect people with words like that too. Study hard, especially Russian. Daria smiled, touched by his enthusiasm. And you can do it, really? The boy asked incredulously. Is literacy really that important? More important than you think, Daria answered seriously. Today you correct mistakes in a text, and tomorrow you save someone's apartment or even life. When the main crowd had dispersed, Dennis approached Daria. He looked unusually serious and somehow quiet. You did well, he said, shifting awkwardly from foot to foot. You did great. Thank you, Daria. She was gathering her papers, trying not to show how tired she was. I didn't know Alla was doing this, Dennis continued. She was always ambitious, but like this, people change, Daria shrugged. We just don't really know them. They left the community center together. The summer evening was warm and gentle, like a cat's paw. Somewhere in the distance, music was playing. Children were laughing, cars were honking. I can give you a ride, Dennis suggested, nodding towards his car. Thanks, but I'd rather walk, Daria declined. Her head was buzzing after all this. I understand, he nodded. Listen, wouldn't you like to move to the PR department? You said so today. It touched my soul. Daria looked at him in surprise. Are you serious? Absolutely. He smiled for the first time that day. You have a talent for convincing people and telling the truth, so that everyone believes it. True. More valuable than gold, Daria said quietly. Mom always said that. You have a wise mother. Dennis looked at her with a new expression, not like a boss looking at a subordinate, but like a man looking at a woman who had surprised and delighted him. Yes. Daria smiled, thinking about how happy her mother would be when she found out about today. Very wise. They stood opposite each other, not knowing what else to say. At that moment, Artyom, Aunt Dasha, ran up. Grandma asked, Tell her. She's inviting you over for pies, with sour cream tomorrow. Tell Grandma I'll definitely come. Daria patted the boy's shaggy head. And you? Artyom looked at Dennis with curiosity. Me, he was confused. Also. Come, Artyom said decisively. Grandma baked a lot. Dennis looked questioningly at Daria. Come, she said after a moment's hesitation. Vera Nikolaevna will be glad. Then I'll come, Dennis nodded. It's been a long time. I haven't eaten homemade pies. When Artyom ran off, Dennis suddenly asked, Listen, do you have a boyfriend? Daria couldn't help but smile. Does this have anything to do with my work in the PR department? No, he rubbed the back of his head, just asked. He simply said, No, Daria said, and headed towards the bus stop. She felt his gaze but didn't turn around. Today had changed something between them, but she wasn't ready yet. Admit exactly what. That evening, Alla Granitskaya sat in the police station, nervously tapping her long nails on the table. Opposite her sat the investigator, a tired, middle-aged man with piercing eyes. So are you claiming you didn't know about the fraudulent scheme? He asked, looking through the documents. Of course not, Alla replied indignantly. I was hired as a PR specialist. I was only responsible for the fund's image. But the accounting documents show that you received a percentage of each transaction. The investigator showed her some statements, a strange payment scheme for a PR specialist. Don't you think? Alla turned pale and bit her lip. I can. Cooperate with the investigation, she finally said. I have information. What kind exactly? The investigator asked inquisitively. Alla leaned closer to the scheme's leaders. I'm just the executor, but who's behind it all? Daria's mother was waiting for her at home. She was sitting in a chair by the window, knitting something with bright blue yarn and looking better than usual. Her cheeks were pink, her eyes were sparkling. How did it go? She asked, putting down her knitting. Daria. She hugged her mother and told her in detail about the meeting, how they managed to help the pensioners who had suffered, and about Dennis's offer to move to the PR department. See, daughter? Mom gently stroked her head, just like when she was a child. It wasn't for nothing that You taught me to check every comma. Your literacy saved people. You saved them, Mommy. Daria snuggled up to her mother. You and your lessons. They sat next to each other for a long time, talking about the past and the future. Outside the window, the stars lit up, one after another, like small hopes in the darkness. Somewhere above the Neva, invisible from here, but palpable, like a sign of fate, their own star was lit, bright and unquenchable. The autumn of 2015 painted Petersburg in gold and maroon. Leaves swirled in the air like tiny ships traveling on invisible currents of wind. The rain turned the streets into mirrors, reflecting neon signs and ancient facades. For Daria, this autumn began with promotion. She was transferred to the PR department of the advertising agency Corona, doubling her salary. Now she not only edited texts but also created them herself, came up with slogans, and participated in brainstorming sessions. Colleagues. They received her well. The story of exposing the fraudsters became office legend. Our Joan of Arc, they joked. On that cloudy October morning, Daria sat at her new desk, reviewing the advertising campaign project for a toy manufacturer. My head was pounding from lack of sleep. Mom was feeling unwell again, and Daria spent half the night taking her blood pressure and reassuring her. Tasha, you need to see the director. At the door, Secretary Lena appeared, a chalky blonde with a perpetually worried expression. Urgent. Daria raised her eyebrows in surprise. Did something happen? I don't know. Lena shrugged, but he seemed a bit nervous. With a heavy premonition, Daria stood up. One floor above, where Dennis's office was located. Over the past few months, their relationship had changed. They had become closer, but at the same time, a wall of awkwardness had grown between them. They often crossed paths at work, and sometimes had lunch together at a cafe, across from the office, but the conversation never turned personal. After the incident with the scammers, Dennis seemed to retreat into a deep space. But his gaze, when he thought she wasn't looking, spoke volumes. Daria knocked and entered. Into the office. Dennis stood by the window with his back to the door, his hands in his trouser pockets. His posture was tense, as if a compressed spring was ready to spring back at any moment. Did you call Denis Alexievich? She asked formally. Daria. He turned around, and she saw his face, drawn, with dark circles under his eyes. Daria, we have problems, he said without preamble. Big problems. What happened? Dar's heart betrayed her. Dennis nodded toward the chair opposite, his desk. Sit down. He sat down opposite her and placed a folder with documents in front of her. Alla filed a lawsuit against the agency, he said dully, and against you personally. Daria felt the blood drain from her face. For what? Officially, for slander and damage to business reputation. Dennis ran his hand through his hair, ruffling it even more. Unofficially, it's revenge. She claims you slandered her to the police, that she had nothing to do with the fraudsters, and she simply worked as a PR director at the fund, unaware of the scam. But that's a lie, Daria exclaimed. There's her signature on all the documents and her voice on the recording where she explains the scheme. I know, Dennis nodded, but I hired good lawyers, and they claim you acted on my instructions to get revenge on her for our past relationship. Daria leaned back in her chair, trying to process what she had heard. So what now? She asked finally. Our lawyers will sort it out. Dennis tried to speak confidently, but his voice was tinged with worry. But there's something else. Gossip in the office. Alla started a rumor about you. About us, about Roman. And you promoted me because of that, Daria guessed, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. Yes. He looked away, and some believed it. Who? she asked sharply. Yura from accounting, Oleg from design. Even Masha asked yesterday. Me, is it true? Daria felt her insides go cold. Masha, her only friend at the agency, even she believed it. Was it really that easy to cross her off the list of professionals and write her off as a bedfellow? Careerists? This is ridiculous. She tried to smile, but it came out crooked. Do they really think my work isn't worth a promotion? People love gossip, Dennis said bitterly, especially such juicy ones. A heavy pause hung in the air. The sound outside grew louder, rain drumming on the glass as if rushing them to make a decision. What are we going to do? Daria finally asked. I think Dennis hesitated. Maybe you should take a vacation? For a little while, until everything settles down. Daria raised her head. Vacation, that is, run away, admit they're right? No, just wait it out. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. Alla won't rest until she gets what she wants. And what does she want? Daria asked quietly. To humiliate me, Dennis answered bluntly. And to destroy you because you, dangerous for her. She's afraid that you'll replace her completely. Well, in my life. He spoke the last words so quietly that Daria barely heard them. She felt herself tormented inside by a strange mixture of fear, anger, and something else she was afraid to name. I'm not going to replace anyone, she said firmly, and I'm not going to leave either. This is my job, I've earned it, and no Allah will fire me. Dennis looked at her with some new expression, a mixture of admiration and anxiety. Okay, he finally said, then we'll fight together. At that moment there was a knock on the door, and Lena looked into the office. Dennis Alexeyevich, there are clients from. Megastroy came to the presentation. Damn, I completely forgot. Dennis jumped up. Daria, we'll continue later. For now, hang in there. When she left the office, Masha was waiting for her in the hallway. Dash, is this true? She asked without preamble. About you and Dennis. No, Daria answered firmly. That's a dirty lie. We're colleagues, nothing more. Masha looked her in the eye, then nodded. I knew it. Don't pay attention to those idiots. Envy is a terrible force. They're together. They went to the break room, where Daria drank a cup of strong coffee, trying to collect her thoughts. As she returned to her desk, she felt the gazes of her colleagues on her. Some looked at her with sympathy, some with curiosity, and some with malice. A gossip is like a virus, thought Daria. All it takes is to infect a few, and an epidemic is guaranteed. The day dragged on endlessly. By evening, a headache set in, and her mood plummeted. When? The phone on the table rang, and Daria jumped. Daria, her mother's worried voice rang out. Honey, can you come? I don't feel well. Daria's heart skipped a beat. What happened? Did you call an ambulance? No, it's just pressure. Mom's voice sounded weak. But I'm scared alone, and I'm out of pills. I'm leaving. Dar jumped up, grabbing her bag. Hold on, Mommy. She ran out of the office, forgetting to say goodbye to her colleagues. On the street, it was pouring rain, turning the city into a blurry watercolor. There were no taxis in sight, and the buses were overcrowded. Daria ran to the metro, but halfway there she remembered she hadn't had time to withdraw money, and there were only a few left on her card. Rubles. Just not now, she thought despairingly, stopping in the middle of the street. The rain mercilessly beat down on her face, mixing with uninvited tears. Daria. A familiar voice broke through the noise of the rain. She turned around. Dennis jumped out of his car, parked at the side of the road, and ran toward her, opening his umbrella. What are you doing here? He shouted. Daria, my mother is soaking wet, was all Daria could manage to croak out, drowning out the noise of the downpour. She's sick and I don't have money for a taxi. Without saying a word, Dennis grabbed her hand and dragged her to the car. Address? He asked briefly, slamming the door behind her. Daria gave the address, and the car took off. They raced through the city, ignoring the traffic lights and road signs. Dennis was focused on the road. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. Thank you, Daria said quietly as they slowed down in front of her house. Let's go. He turned off the engine. I'm with you. No need I'll go myself. Let's go, he repeated in such a tone that arguing became pointless. The apartment was quiet and dark. Galina Svetlova was lying on the sofa, covered with a blanket. Her face was white as paper. Mommy. Daria rushed to her, grabbing. By the hand. How are you? Better. She smiled weakly. I just felt dizzy. I was afraid I would fall. We need to go to the hospital, Daria said firmly, turning to Dennis, who was awkwardly. He was hovering near the door. "Denis Alexeyevich, could you? I already called. He showed me the phone. They'll be here in 5 minutes. Tell me, what pills do you need?" "I'll run to the pharmacy." Galina looked at the unfamiliar man in surprise, in an expensive suit standing in their modest hallway. "This is Denis Alexeyevich, my boss," Daria explained hastily. "He helped me get there. Nice to meet you." Galina tried to get up, but Daria gently held her back. "Sorry about concern. No concern." Denis stepped closer. What pills did he need? Daria wrote out a list and handed it to him, but he shook his head. "Come with me. I don't understand medications, and the ambulance will find its way." At the pharmacy, Denis was silent. He took out his credit card and paid for all the medications, ignoring Daria's attempts to object. When they returned, an ambulance was already at the entrance. The doctors quickly examined Galina, took her blood pressure, and performed an electrocardiogram. "Hypertensive crisis," said the elderly doctor, removing his stethoscope. "She needs to be hospitalized." "Where are you taking her?" Daria asked anxiously. "They're on duty at the 26th station right now," the doctor replied, filling out some paperwork. Daria swallowed. Hospital number 26 was notorious for its terrible conditions and indifferent staff. "Can we go to City Hospital number 1? She asked timidly. "She's closer to us." "It's impossible," the doctor snapped. "It's not our area, and if we have to pay," Denis intervened. "What good clinic can I go to?" The doctor looked at him appraisingly. "You can go to Med Inkom and Vasilyevsky, but everything there is expensive. Call." Denis handed over his business card. "I'll pay." An hour later, Galina was already being settled into a cozy room at a private clinic. Denis took care of all the formalities while Daria was with her mother. When she went out into the hallway, he was sitting on a leather sofa flipping through some magazine. "How is she?" he asked, looking up. "Better." Daria sat down next to him, feeling mortally tired. "Thank you. I'll return everything." "Just don't even start," he interrupted. "Nobody owes anything to anybody. I helped because he wanted to help. Period." They sat in silence, looking at the sterile white wall opposite. The air smelled of medicine and antiseptic. Somewhere in the depths of the corridor, someone was quietly crying. A child. "You know," Denis said unexpectedly and seriously, "when I was 13, I got pneumonia in the orphanage. I was admitted to a hospital, a regular one, a district hospital. The doctors were saying among themselves that I wouldn't pull through. I was too weak. Without immunity, they didn't know I could hear everything." Daria held her breath, afraid to move. "I was in a 6-person ward," he continued. "Everyone's parents and grandmothers came to see me, bringing food, oranges, and no one came to me, and I swore to myself that if I survived, I would never be—" He hesitated, searching for the word helpless. "I will never depend on someone else's mercy, and I will never pass by someone else's troubles." "And you got better," Daria said quietly, involuntarily touching his hand. "Yes," he smiled sadly. "Despite everyone. Then I was transferred to another orphanage, then to a vocational school, and the rest you know." Daria carefully touched him. "Hands, thanks for telling me. And thanks for the help, too." He finally turned to her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her insides ache. "I'm not out of pity," he said suddenly, heatedly. "You're talented. In short, literacy is a whole new luxury." Daria couldn't understand what he was getting at. "What do you mean?" "Work." He looked away. "I didn't promote you out of pity. You really are smart and honest. There are few like you." She couldn't help but laugh nervously. Tired, but sincere. Denis smiled too, looking at his phone. "Damn. I'm killing the Russian language with my messages. Pushkin must be turning over in his grave every time I write songs instead of thank you. Not only that, Pushkin." Daria narrowed her eyes slyly. I shudder a little too. They laughed together, and the tension hanging between them eased a little. "Listen, Denis Alexeyevich," Daria suddenly became serious. "About work? I want. Stay, but on my terms. What are they?" He tensed up. "Equal pay with everyone else at my level. No concessions. If I can't handle it, I'm fired without a fight." Denis rubbed his hand thoughtfully. "Chin. Agreed. But on one condition." "What is it?" "Just call me Denis. No patronymic. This Alexeyevich makes me feel 10 years older." Daria extended her hand. "Shake. Denis." He shook her hand, and for a moment there. The fingers intertwined a little longer than was required for a business handshake. While Galina Svetlova was in the hospital, a scandal was brewing at the Corona advertising agency. Alla Granitskaya didn't limit herself to a lawsuit. She gave an interview with a tabloid newspaper. where Denis Korolev was accused of patronizing his mistress and unfair competition. The article didn't name names directly, but everyone in St. Petersburg's advertising world knew who it was. Some clients began, expressed concern. The employees were whispering in the corners. Daria felt sidelong glances and heard snatches of conversations that died down when she appeared. That evening after work, she stopped by to check on. "Mom." Galina looked better. Her cheeks were pinker, her eyes clearer. "How are you, Mommy?" Daria sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing out the creases in the blanket. "Much better, honey." Galina smiled. "The nurses here are so caring. And the doctor, the wonderful one, said that we can go home in a week. Wonderful." Daria kissed her mother on the forehead. "I was so worried. And how are you?" Galina looked at her carefully. "You look tired." Daria sighed. "It was hard to hide anything from my mother." "There are problems at work," she confessed. "One woman is spreading nasty rumors about me, that I'm sleeping with my boss for the sake of my career." Galina frowned, and many believed her. Some even cut their hands. "And that's true. It's a shame. I worked so hard, I tried so hard. And your boss, the one who brought you here, what does he think? He's on my side." Dare felt the blood rush to her cheeks. "He's a good man, Mom. Not what he seems at first glance. Look." Galina looked closely at her daughter. "Do you like him?" "Mom, what?" Galina smiled. "I see how you talk about him. Your eyes are shining." Daria tried to laugh it off out of indignation, but under her mother's penetrating gaze. "I gave up. Well, maybe a little, but it doesn't matter. The main thing now is to fight off this gossip,